Are you ready to rewind? Take a nostalgia-filled ride back to a simpler time. It's Acid Wash Memories, a retro pop culture celebration. And now your hosts, Joe Murata and Michael Quinn.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 66 of Acid Wash Memories, a retro pop culture celebration. Today, the Mario series continues into the next generation. My name is Joe Murata, joined by the 64-bit man, Michael Quinn. How you doing there, Michael?
Wahoo!
Yeah, wahoo indeed.
What he does.
Thank you guys for saying wahoo and joining us here for another rousing edition of Acid Wash Memories. Very roused, Quinn.
Oh, this is going to be rousing.
So much rousing.
It's a momentous moment in Mario history.
It really is. We're going to be talking all about that. We're picking up where we left off. But if this happens to be your first time, we are a retro pop culture celebration. Each week is something completely different. And we do have, Quinn, 65 other episodes available where?
In the archives.
In the archives. So if you're not interested in Mario, we got plenty of other stuff. And next week will be something completely different as well. Whether you're new or old, we would like to encourage you to follow us on Twitter at AWM Podcast. And you can also join, Quinn, our very friendly Facebook group, right?
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. Ever heard of it?
Yeah, Facebook.
Facebook. Over there, it's called Acid Wash Memories, which is a very creative title for the name of the group.
Revolutionary, really, just like Mario 64.
Exactly. A lot of work went into that one. But really, the best thing about our Facebook group is it's friendly.
Yes, so friendly.
Very
home
friendly.
Crap home.
Home crap home. You talk about old retro pop culture stuff with a bunch of other folks. Okay, so that's the deal. Follow us on Twitter, join our Facebook group, leave us a review if you don't mind. Now, if you are interested in Mario and you haven't yet, I do encourage you guys to go through the archives. We've covered Mario 1, 2, 3, World, the games of 92, the games of 93, and most recently, Yoshi's Island, and everything in betwixt.
Shut up. Betwixt? Seriously?
I will say, though, Quinn, we may be pressing pause, so to speak, on this series after this episode.
Because this is kind of like, I feel like all the Mario games are basically like this after this. Like,
in a lot of ways.
I mean, you could go kart and all that, but I mean, it's all just derivative at this point. It's just like, oh, it's 3D now, and that's that.
And I don't have a burning desire to cover Paper Mario, no offense. One thing that I want to say right off the bat here is, I realize this, Quinn, we missed the boat by not doing this as episode number 64.
Wow.
So sorry about that. But where we left off was Yoshi's Island. Super Mario World 2 came out in the fall of 1995. And as we talked about, it was very well received.
Yes.
It really was like a late entry into the SNES peak, I guess, like the end of it, right?
Yeah. It was just a good little hey, we know how to use this hardware now, and we're going to make this thing, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Even though they kind of did their own thing with the art or whatever, but overall, it was just fantastic.
So by the end of 1995 in the video game landscape, the 32-bit era has already begun. The Sega Saturn's out.
Yeah.
The PlayStation is out in the United States. It was already out in Japan. The 3DO is out.
Who cares?
I mean, so the big aspects here, right? The game changing is that 3D is now a thing, right? It started in the arcades with the Virtua Fighters and the Daytonas. Sega of all people.
Of course.
It's ironic to me that Sega's the big pioneer, but they just didn't, when they moved their consoles to 3D, it just wasn't as good.
It wasn't. And even Atari got back into the game with the Jaguar.
Yeah. That was a weird
64-bit
excursion.
Piece of shit.
Sega Genesis is 16 bits. 3DO is 32 bits. The Atari Jaguar is 64 bits.
But, of course, Nintendo had been developing its own next-generation console since 1993. And what they were looking to do was come up with a true 64-bit successor to the Super Nintendo. They were just going to skip the 32-bit. They were going to go right to 64. And this started when Silicon Graphics had been developing their own 64-bit framework to use. They were going to shop to video game console manufacturers. And they initially pitched their technology to Tom Kalinske of Sega of America.
Right.
And Sega of America declined the design.
This makes sense, though, because of Sega's kind of the thing is, Sega knew what they were doing as a company with 3D.
They had a proven track record.
They had a proven track record.
No
why
pun
do they
intended
need
with
to?
Daytona.
Yeah, why do they need to contract out to some other person? Right? They did all the research and everything. Now, did that translate into a home console? But that's not for technical reasons. That's for cost cutting reasons. They thought oh, the adoption of 3D is not going to be as fast as, like, it's one thing to have this in the arcades, right, where, you know, we can put the craziest hardware ever.
Right.
But it's another thing to, like, say, like, this is how it's going to be at home now, right?
Right. And they also whiffed with the 32X, which we talked about in our Sega Consoles episode.
But again, even so, Sega still was kind of like, some games will be 3D, but 2D will still be around. Like, they were very wishy-washy about how it would work in the home.
You're right about that. It wasn't clear-cut.
I think they just mishandled the desire for 3D. They didn't realize, like, the impact that, like, it's almost their own fault that everybody wanted 3D, right? Like, this has been talked about how, like, in a weird way, it's Sega's fault that 3D, the demand for 3D, because their 3D games were so great.
Yeah,
in the
they're
arcade,
the ones that helped drive it.
Right? But the irony is, like, they weren't ready to bring that into the home. They wanted that to be like an arcade thing.
That's a really good point, Quinn.
Right.
So Jim Clark of Silicon met with Nintendo in early 1993, and both companies did decide to team up. So in August of 1993, it was announced that this new endeavor between Nintendo and Silicon Graphics, known as Project Reality, would be available in late 1995. Quick spoiler, it was not.
Yes.
It did not come out in 95.
Is this all linked to like how, like, for example, like Killer Instinct said, available on the Ultra 64 in 1995?
I bet it is, yeah.
Like, it's like...
Available for your home in 1995, only on Nintendo Ultra 64.
What a weird idea to put, like, a hard, like, release date into an arcade audio game.
That is a really
like,
weird
it's
idea.
Just yelling in the arcades all day. Like, it's like,
coming to the Nintendo Ultra 64 in 1995.
Like, it's like blaring through, like, arcades across America.
That is a bit of a gambit, isn't it,
yeah,
to do
it's
that?
just like, wow, you really are committed. Because people, like, back then, people went to arcades, like, maybe every week or, you know, because they were like a hangout spot.
Sure.
If there's an arcade machine yelling that this shit's going to come out on a system, first of all, with the wrong name.
Yeah, that's also true.
At a date that's not the actual date.
They kind of whiffed on that, huh?
Yeah.
They really did. So by the summer of 1994, that's, of course, when The Undertaker was going to fight The Undertaker.
Really?
The new console on this project had been unveiled as the Ultra 64.
Yes, I remember the big reveal in EGM magazine, Mario with his hands over it and stuff.
And everyone's talking about just one thing, the Ultra 64.
No Nintendo 64. It was very ultra by this point. Nobody
64.
was talking, because it was like, it made sense in a weird way, because it was like we were super, now we're ultra.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, okay, like, fine,
we
right?
get it.
Yeah.
Now, I would have gone with Ultra Nintendo, personally.
Yeah, but they really wanted to be like, yo, those ones are 32 bits.
Yeah.
We got double the bits over here.
They do have twice the bits.
Yeah.
And you know what happens when you have twice the bits. It makes
Ironically,
everything
it's
better.
like very irrelevant by this point.
Extremely.
Like, once you have 32, you're kind of like, for what we're doing here, even as 3D, it's okay.
For what we're doing here.
What exactly are we doing here?
And there was a dream team of developers that had signed on to work with Nintendo here, including Silicon Graphics themselves, but also Alias, Software Creations, Multigen, Rare, Williams, Mindscape, and several others.
A lot of the players in the game at this point.
A lot of the big players there. Now, the initial plan, this was not something that wound up happening, was they were going to call in Japan the system the Ultra Famicom. And in North America and elsewhere, they were going to call it the Nintendo Ultra 64. And eventually they just decided, you know what, enough of this. Let's call this the same name everywhere.
I think that was a good idea.
Yep.
Like enough with this Famicom like thing, because the thing is, it was like, if you think about it, right, from like a world perspective, it's literally like one region that it's Famicom. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, might as well, like, okay, if there's 3 regions, basically, like Europe, North America, and Japan.
Yeah, pretty much is what they call it.
Why don't, like, all of them adopt the one that 2 of the 3 are used to calling it?
It's the whole Balrog Vega Bison thing all over again, Quinn.
Although Capcom never gave up on that shit. Like,
they still haven't.
Yeah, it's still that way.
So the name they settled on worldwide is Nintendo 64.
The possibilities are endless.
Man, this thing goes on forever.
With Nintendo 64.
Simple. What do you think of that name?
It's fine.
I like it, right? It's
like,
fine.
I don't have a problem with it.
No.
They still get their little moniker in there, like they had with Super, so they could put Super on the front of the games. They could put 64 on the end of the games now. Like,
Exactly.
And it's like, it's all there.
It's all there. So the console was formally revealed to the public in Japan in November of 95, like demos and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is late 95, but it's not out yet.
Right.
Killer Instinct ain't on it.
Yeah.
And
that was the one where they were really like, yo, this is like Ultra 60.
Yeah,
it's going to be here. Like,
we promise.
Killer Instinct, man.
We're coding it into the arcade games to remind you.
This arcade game, this is like going to be like Ultra 64, man.
Meanwhile, Nintendo was, of course, busy doing what they do best, making a Mario game. Now, this Mario game was released in Japan in March of 1996 and in May of 96 in the United States of America. And of course, it was for the Super Nintendo.
Right, the Super Nintendo.
Yes, remember that one?
Very relevant system at this point.
We're still here.
Yeah.
And it was developed by Square.
Yes. So we're getting weird here now, right?
We are. This, of course, is Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Quinn, what is an RPG?
It's a role-playing game.
Oh.
That's what it stands for.
Yes.
You play a character, a role, if you will, and it's more strategic. It's more,
the fighting is weird.
You take your turn and you like, I'm going to attack. Maybe I'll cast a spell. Maybe I'll use an item because my life is low or something. Maybe I'll just run away. There's run away usually.
You can just run away. You can just leave.
I'm going to lose. I need to get the hell out of here, right?
So they're not quite action-packed, would you say?
They can be because like that. And I think that's why Nintendo picks somebody such as a Square, right? Because Square, what their strength is making these role-playing games look action-packed. You know, the attacks were really flashy. Like, even though you're picking what you do before you do it, when he does do it, whoever character, it looks awesome. And that's one of the trade-offs with an RPG is that maybe the action's not as fast, but because you can program all these different choices, the attacks, the action can look really, really cool, especially on these primitive graphics.
There you go.
So that's why they were a very popular style game back then because of the limitations, right?
Well said, Michael.
Not to mention like Dungeons and Dragons. That's really what they were like.
That's the original RPG.
That's what they were all like trying to ape was that style. It was like, what if we made a story, like different stories around Dungeons and Dragons style gameplay?
Pretty much what it was. For those of you that have no idea about RPGs, and that's probably at least some chunk of our audience.
Yeah.
The most famous, unless I'm wrong,
in
Quinn,
North America
would be the Final Fantasy series.
Right,
that's
which
from
was
Square is what I mean.
Squaresoft made back then. Now, in overseas, it's Dragon Quest, which was Enix's Enix's joint. And we're in a time here where Square and Enix are
separate.
Different companies. They unified or whatever.
They did. They merged. Now, the idea here was basically to make a gateway to RPGs. Like Nintendo was going to get into the game.
Which, ironically, there's a little backstory here with all of this, right? In the late 80s, Nintendo got behind the original Final Fantasy. They did. I don't know if they published it in America, but they were heavily into the marketing and promotion of it, to the point of like it was all over Nintendo Power. Like, and the reason was in Japan, Dragon Quest actually took the hell off.
Right.
It was like a crazy high seller. Like, it's like legendary. Like, this is kind of like a misnomer. It's not really true, but there was always a long-standing rumor in Japan that Dragon Quest games were so popular that they would only release them on the weekends so that kids wouldn't be like skipping school and shit. And they did release them on the weekends. That was true.
Right.
It's just people like came to the assumption in Japan, they're like, oh, this must be because kids were cutting school or something to go play this.
It's probably just because more people are available to shop.
Right.
Yeah.
Either way, the point is it was like extremely popular, and Nintendo was like, man, that's only Japan. If we can get the United States audience hooked on this RPG thing, this could be bigger than Mario. Right? Because it was like bigger than Mario.
In
and
Japan.
It really was like the most popular style of game over there.
In Japan, yes.
Yeah. And so Square made their own Dragon Quest style game called Final Fantasy, and Nintendo was like, we're going to hop on this. This is brand new. We're going to get it over to the United States, and we're going to make it a big deal. It didn't take off.
Not the way they expected.
Not really the way they expected, but the interesting thing was Square was not deterred because they were selling good in Japan.
Right.
So they kept making sequels to Final Fantasy.
We just didn't pull them all in.
Right. But Square was making other great video games as well during this time.
Yes.
And so Nintendo was like, what if we say, hey, Square, here's Mario. Make one of your great games with Mario.
You gotta appreciate the idea there, because Mario had been historically, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is 1996 we're talking about,
right?
Historically, Mario was Nintendo's top seller. You put Mario on it, it's going to sell. Whether he's riding a dinosaur, whether he's driving a cart, whether he's painting, whether he's a doctor, right? Mario has sold. So the dangling carrot of let's use the Mario characters as an entry drug, basically a gateway drug.
And then put the sterling reputation of Squaresoft on the box also. And it's like, here's two things that maybe you don't love Squaresoft game, but you know they have a good reputation. But also, here's Mario, which we know you love.
It's a pretty good idea.
What if we combine the two things together?
It really is a good idea. I'm speaking as someone that is not
You're not even an
RPG fan
but
at
you
all.
Also, Squaresoft's reputation was almost ubiquitous as like great game makers.
Yeah, well, they
right?
also made Rad Racer.
Like
Quinn.
but I'm saying in the early days of video games, there was like a rarefied air of video game developers that even if maybe you didn't play their games, you knew they were the good ones. Like Capcom, Konami, Squaresoft, and the likes.
Later on, Rare was another one. Tecmo.
You just knew that those were the good people.
Right, it wasn't LJN or...
Yeah, and it was very rare for Nintendo, no pun intended, rare. But it was very rare for Nintendo to even work with other developers. Like Rare was kind of the only other person they really kind of...
Yeah, they went all in with Donkey Kong.
Right.
It was one of the biggest, most recent ones at that point. So this game, Super Mario RPG, I'll tell you what, I mean, I didn't buy it because I wasn't really into RPGs, but I've played Super Mario RPG.
It's great.
I was going to ask you, as an RPG fan, certainly more than myself, I have nothing against them, I just never got into them. Do you feel that Super Mario RPG is a good RPG?
It is.
Would a purist disagree?
Well, maybe.
I played it in the early days of even caring about RPGs.
Okay.
So I was never able to finish it. A lot of it was due to that I was younger and I didn't really understand that I was supposed to grind my levels up. So I got to a point in the game. I remember very specifically, it was like some pirate ship or something. Like it was like I was in the bottom of the ship and there was like sharks attacking me and stuff. And I was like, I don't understand. Like I was able to beat all the enemies normally, and now like none of my stuff hits hard enough and I can't beat them. So that was like one of my first times playing an RPG, and it took a couple years of reading magazines and you're supposed to like go fight the lower enemies and get stronger,
right?
And then that's what the levels mean, right? It's like it didn't kind of compute with me in 1996.
Fair enough.
Super Mario RPG, only on the system that keeps on kicking. Super NES.
Dig it?
Now the plot. Not that we care about plots too much, but there's a little bit of an interesting bit about this. So it starts with Mario needing to rescue Princess Toadstool, she's still called in this game, from Bowser yet again.
Right.
But while Mario and Bowser are fighting, a giant sword crashes into Bowser's castle, which scatters 7 stars all around. And the bad guys here, the culprits, are the Smithy gang.
Right.
And there are other allies that Mario has, such as Mallow and Geno. And,
it's good, Joe.
And Bowser.
Yes. So this is what was interesting about this game, right?
Yes.
Square's making this game, and they're like, well, there's Mario and Luigi.
Yeah, the usuals.
By this time, they didn't really establish that Princess Toadstool was like a fighter or anything.
No, because she was only in Mario 2, and that was it.
Right, and Toad's definitely not going to... He stinks.
Fuck Toad.
Yeah. So, like, it's like they basically realized it's like, well, one of the hallmarks of any RPG, not even a Square Enix RPG, any RPG, is you have to have a party. Like, you have to have a group of characters.
Yeah, like a posse.
Because they take turns. That's how the battling works, right?
Correct,
it's like,
yes.
It gets pretty boring if you're just one guy. And sometimes there is situations where you're just one guy. But, like, you got to add people into this.
That's exactly why I'm here, so it doesn't get boring.
Oh, me too, chap.
Who the hell are you?
And I think what was so funny is the other thing that Square Enix was good at doing was establishing characters.
Yes.
So they built up who Geno was and Mallow was, and they built up reasoning why Bowser was with you and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think what's funny about this game is that after this game came out, no more Geno and Mallow and anything.
No.
Like, and like people like to this day are like, why don't they bring back Geno and Mallow? Like, we know them.
We got any big Geno and Mallow fans out there? Let us know at AWM Podcast on Twitter. Yeah, Bowser joins up because he with his tail, proverbial tail between his legs to help to get Mario's help to rebuild his castle.
He's kind of he's
it's
like
for his own interest.
He's the reluctant ally.
Yeah.
Like he's just like, listen, we can fight after this.
Yeah,
but like I need to get my castle back first, so I'll team up with you. And Mario's like, well, I gotta get rid of these smithy people.
Yeah,
so like,
fuck these people.
Okay, so like we'll team just for now.
Yes,
like
we still hate each other.
Truce.
Yeah, truce, basically. And that's what it is. And like I said, I'm not an RPG guy. I have played it. I did like it. A lot of people did. Reception-wise, it sold 1.5 million in Japan, which made it the third highest-selling video game in Japan of 1996.
Yeah, and there's also another funny tie-in here, right?
Go ahead.
The graphics were done with the pre-rendered Silicon graphics machines.
Yes.
So,
Great
like,
point, Quinn.
This is a thing that went back to like Donkey Kong Country, really. And
Yes.
I think we talked about it where as like almost like a stopgap, right? Is like the closest to rendering like real 3D on Super Nintendo was Star Fox, right? But they quickly realized it's like the game's slow as hell. We can't make like other games like this.
Right.
Like so what they realized was like somebody figured out the trick of what if we scan pre-rendered like a supercomputer renders what it just looks like stills of it.
Yeah.
And then we just make frames of animation from those stills. And then it like sort of looks like it's 3D, but it's not really. It's just sprites, but instead we replace the actual like sprite with just the scanned in image basically.
But it was used to tremendous effect in Donkey Kong Country, astonishing effect at the time in 94.
And Mario RPG was another one that used it because Mario had RPG also had an overhead view, so it kind of worked in a cool way.
It did.
So it looked more 3D than it was. Other games that kind of tried something like this were like Sonic 3D Blast.
Sonic 3D Blast is another one.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's the same concept. And so Mario RPG, in my view, almost felt like a weird preview of what was to come in the 3D era. Like, this is what Mario looks like in 3D.
I think you're right, because the view that Quinn is referring to is a pseudo 3D isometric view, which is like diagonal from the ceiling,
But not even
essentially.
just that, his character model was different.
The model was different, yeah.
Because they chose that style of graphic.
Yeah, and I think it works great to great effect there. In the United States of America, it was the 6th best-selling game of 96, so this was no clunker.
No.
Let's be clear. It might be completely different genre-wise for a Mario game, but it still did very, very well. And critically, it was acclaimed.
Yes.
The isometric view, the graphics we were just talking about, but not only that, the gameplay and the appeal. Most of the appeal coming from the fact that they slapped the Mario characters on it. Let's be honest here.
Right, but I think it found a nice cross-section of maybe some people who were playing those Final Fantasy games and some players who they couldn't get into it because they just didn't know the characters, or like they just had no interest, right?
They didn't want to play that role.
Yeah, that was always one of the drawbacks of Final Fantasy is like every Final Fantasy is a completely different story with brand new characters, right? It's like, it's weird because it says Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, but none of them are connected at all. So
correct.
For some people, this was this was such a barrier.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, do I have to play the other ones? It's like, no, like you don't, but like, it's really hard to explain that to people. Then why is it called Final Fantasy 3? I don't get it.
Yeah, you're right though.
Yeah.
You're right. Overall, you can call this game a winner. You really can. Like this did well. But remember, how many bits are we dealing with in this game, Quinn?
Only the 16.
Okay.
Even though it's like so irrelevant. I think it's just funny that like in terms of like marketing, the way they like dumbed it down for us, like that graphics better was basically like more bits.
Well, Sega did that first.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
They did what Sega does with Nintendo, and they started it.
16 bits isn't even bad, by the way. Like
it is. It's very good.
Yeah.
So let's go to the 64-bit console again, the Nintendo 64. This was initially planned for a Christmas of 95 release, as we talked about, right? This got delayed until April of 96. Nintendo claimed they needed more time for game development. That release date was then pushed to June, which is when it was released in Japan, June 23rd, 96. The United States would get it in September.
Right.
Europe in 97. But in both instances, the Nintendo 64 was bundled with a brand new game known as Super Mario 64.
That's a Nintendo thing.
Yep.
They always bundle Mario with it. Now, I know some people there. I have seen some conjecture online that
online. I've never
that you may have not been able to get Mario 64 in certain bundles, like with it or not. Like it's one of the first times they didn't. Like it wasn't 100%.
They might have bundled other stuff with it. You mean,
or even there was just like a singular, just the console.
They did that with Super Nintendo.
Yeah,
so it's possible.
I've seen that online.
Okay. So we're going to talk all about Super Mario 64, the development, the gameplay, the legacy, and the influence. But before we do that, we must take a break for just a bit. Sorry. On the other side of this break, we'll talk about Super Mario 64 as we continue the Mario series here on Acid Wash Memories.
Give me one reason to stay here, and I'll turn right back around. Give me one reason to stay here, and I'll turn right back around.
Yo, listen up. We will not live in a two-dimensional world.
We won't go in one direction
Or seek where we can say.
We will walk through walls. We will take a look around us. We will not be confined.
We believe in the path of least limits.
We won't be told how to view the world.
We will experience true freedom. We will not compromise.
We will live the game through our hands.
We will be in control of something.
We will change the system.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Pack up your stuff.
I got a little surprise for you here. Check it out. What do you think about that? We got real-time, 3D, lush organic environments. How's that make you feel, buddy?
Feel a little like your days are numbered?
I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
You're hurting my elbow.
Is that Italian?
No, Bandicoot. It's an Australian name.
Wendy's has a new cheeseburger with a quarter-pound of fresh beef, 3 full strips of bacon with mushrooms and a delicious cheddar cheese sauce, all on a toasted Kaiser bun. Introducing Wendy's Bacon Mushroom Melt.
When you gotta have one, you gotta have one.
And now we return to more acid-washed memories.
And welcome back to Acid Wash Memories. This is episode number 66. We're talking about Super Mario 64. I'm Joe Morata. That's Mallow.
Hi, I'm Mallow.
Hi, Mallow. Folks, thank you so much for being with us here. We hope you don't think this is a Mallow episode.
Yeah.
Sorry. I am so sorry for the bad puns. But
See, he means mellow.
No, I meant Mallow like in Spanish. It's even worse than you thought.
Wow, okay. I thought you were...
No, see, it's even worse than you thought.
That's horrible. Why'd you do that?
It's what I do. I don't know. I can't help it. I'm getting older. Anyway, thank you guys for being with us here. Again, if you don't like this, I don't know why you're still listening, but we appreciate it one way or another. Follow us on Twitter at AWM Podcast and join our Facebook group and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. We'd like all of those things, wouldn't we, Quinn?
Yes, we love it.
We love it.
It's so good.
So another thing that's good is Super Mario 64. We talked about how the console, Nintendo 64, came out in June of 96 in Japan.
Not the Ultra 64.
Now it is just strictly Nintendo, no Famicom, none of this crap.
Yeah.
Okay. September in North America, and Europe got it in mid-97 because it's Europe, you know.
Yeah.
Fish and cheaps and things like that.
Cheap.
Oi, mate, we don't care as much about the Mario over here on our side of the pond, right? Bit of a plonker, that plumber. Hey, a plonker plumber. Fish and cheaps.
So
they got their ZX Spectrum. They don't care that much.
ZX.
Sorry, ZX.
ZX. Yeah. Now, the development of this game, Super Mario 64, of course, as all great Mario games do, goes back to Shigeru Miyamoto.
Right. They wouldn't... Listen, for a leap like this, you're not going to bring in the secondary people.
You can't.
Like, it's
as good as they are.
Yeah. This is like... Okay, we're taking Mario to the 3D. Okay,
we need Miyamoto.
We need the big guns here.
We do.
Like, I'm assuming like Tezuka and all those guys are involved too.
They're always involved.
Yeah, like his whole like his dream team. Yeah, like his main guys, right?
Yes, but he is leading the charge. Now, Miyamoto had been developing Star Fox in the earlier 90s. Using Super Nintendo's Super FX chip, which we have talked about. But Miyamoto, of course, as he often does, had an idea for a Mario game. It was allegedly known as Super Mario FX. There is a little bit of conjecture, Quinn, about Super Mario FX, because some people say...
FX?
Some people say it was a planned Super FX chip game.
I never even heard of it.
Correct. Some people say... They were just they were code-naming the chip the Super Mario FX chip. One way or another, there is no Super Mario FX, so don't look for it, okay?
Gotcha.
However, in January of 93 at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show.
Yes, CES.
Yes, CES. Star Fox was previewed, and Nintendo demoed the Super FX capabilities with a little demo of a 3D polygon of Mario. That is the first time anyone had ever seen Mario in that type of 3D form. It was this little demo at CES. But in September of 94, production began in earnest. Hey, Vern, sorry.
Yeah.
Of a new...
Anytime you say that, I think of him.
Of a new 3D-based Mario Brothers game, but not for the Super Nintendo. No. It was going to be for the new Ultra 64 at the time.
Man, could you imagine 15 frames per second Mario? Horrible.
Horrible is right.
It's like, that's what Star Fox was. It was like so low. It was like all slow and everything.
It was very slow. Or imagine it being like the Street Fighter Alpha 2 for Super FX2. Remember that? So the initial idea was to have an isometric view, similar to what we got with Super Mario RPG. But as development and ideas were kicked around, they decided to try out more of a sandbox style 3D freeform approach.
Which is, if you know, obviously a lot of people played Super Mario. It's more of a sandbox game.
Yeah.
Like that's almost like the big standout thing. You don't even need to know what a sandbox is. You just know that, like, oh, look, there's these big environments and you can just run around and figure shit out.
Now, a lot of detail was put into depth perception because this is a whole new thing. This is not just a 2D, flat plane running.
It's not just the X and Y now. Now it's the X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, more of the alphabet, Quinn.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more.
3D.
So there's 3Ds.
Yeah.
It's not just 2Ds.
We're entering the third dimension.
Do you get it, folks?
Yeah.
Do you understand what we're talking about? Mm-hmm. So they put a lot of emphasis on the 3D modeling. And the camera. Quinn, can you explain? I know this sounds weird, but can you explain what a video game 3D camera is?
Okay. So when 3D games first came along, first of all, sometimes they were just like a fixed camera, right? So for example, in Doom, which is an early 3D game, if you've never heard of Doom, I'm sure everyone's heard. So it's only the first real home console 3D game.
I bet even your dad, Mr. Quinn, has heard of Doom.
Yes, Doom. So Doom, the camera's just in a first-person perspective, right? You can look around and control it, and, where you point and shoot, that's where you point and shoot, right?
Yep, you're just looking around, pointing and shooting.
But after that came along games where you were kind of over the character's shoulder, if you will. Not over the shoulder like we would think of post-Resident Evil 4 for video games,
sure.
Which is you're really, really close up to the shoulder. I'm talking about
like a parrot.
You're pulled out a little bit from the character.
Yes.
Third person, if you will.
It is third person, technically,
right?
Yes.
There were games like Tomb Raider, but the camera was always kind of a problem. They couldn't figure out, should it be fixed? Should it be movable by the user? Should we pick the camera angle?
Right.
So there's a bunch of examples. For example, Resident Evil, that in those they said, well, we'll just put the camera at a fixed point in each of the rooms. All the rooms have a different fixed point where the camera is, and you control the character with tank controls,
right.
Meaning when you hit forward, whatever direction is forward. When you hit up, whatever direction is forward for your character, depending on where the camera's facing, that's where you go. So even though your character's looking at the camera, if you hit up, he'll walk towards the camera. Right?
Hey, are you guys getting all this? Cameras, tanks, shoulders?
Yeah, of course, chum. Bit simple, innit?
Will you stop?
Anyway, so Mario 64, what it brought to the game was camera control. They made a conscious decision. They said, okay, we're going to go with the user-controlled camera, right?
Yep.
Where Mario moves around, there's a default behind him. But if you just leave it at the default, sometimes you get into spots where you're maybe too far to the right or too far to the left.
You
can't see in front of you, or you can't see ahead of you or something.
Yep.
Or maybe you need to see on the side of you, whatever. So what they did is on the new Nintendo 64 controller, they used the see up, down, left, right.
Yes, there's
buttons.
a C-pad, which is on the right of the control.
Right. They're the yellow buttons.
The
if
yellow
you don't
buttons.
remember other than what the button colors
Yeah,
were.
they're the yellow ones. There's also the blue A button, the green B button.
Punch the button, Greg.
Again, if you don't remember, they had little arrows on these C buttons, so you could, maybe if you needed to look down because this was a new control scheme, and you're okay, where are these? What is this?
Mm-hmm.
When you hit C left, the camera would go to the left, and you could just, whatever situation you were in, you were able to focus the camera to wherever you needed it to be.
Correct.
And it was responsive. It did what it was supposed to do. It made sense.
A lot of effort was put into the camera system, and people have their criticisms about it, which we can discuss later.
It's not perfect. I mean, you have to remember, this is a version 1. Nobody had done this before.
Correct. But the Nintendo 64's controller plays a part in this because the controller not only has the standard, D-pad, as Nintendo controls had, and most consoles have. It also introduced an analog stick.
Which is another big, big aspect of this.
Right, because if you're doing a 3D game, it is cool if you can, literally use a 360 motion.
Right. So one of the problems with this, and again, I feel like Resident Evil is such a good, and Resident Evil and Tomb Raider are like the two big examples.
Mm-hmm.
Tomb Raider, it came out in a time when it was before the analog sticks were on there. So when you wanted to move Laura, it was kind of like rigid.
Yeah.
Like it almost felt like she could only go
like
hard left,
on
hard
two
right.
axes, basically.
So you even had to like hold stuff to like turn her. She had to like stop and turn,
I
right?
remember. Mm-hmm.
And then it was very like deliberate. It's like, okay, I'm going to jump here. So I'm going to stop, hold the grab button, jump so that she grabs onto the thing, and then pull myself. Like it was like
it wasn't fluid.
It wasn't fluid. It was like a whole operation, and it felt rigid when you moved her around too.
This analog stick changes the whole feel.
Resident Evil, their solution, like I said again, was the camera thing, tank controls.
Yes.
Again, rigid.
Tank controls.
It was so bad that in later Resident Evils, they added a quick turnaround button because it was just like if there was like a zombie around you, you're like, how do I he's gonna bite me in the back if I can't turn around in time. So they literally had to add an action that just literally 180s your character.
Yeah,
that's like what it does.
You're right.
So, but what Mario 64, and this is the advantage of being the hardware maker, right?
Of course.
Because that was one thing that was very exciting about Mario 64 is that Nintendo was making it, but they were also kind of designing the controller around it.
Same way that we know about Super Nintendo.
Right? So they put an analog stick on their controller. Now, they're not the first of their kind. Sega Saturn actually had like a 3D control. It looked like butt. It's like a huge circle, and it's got one stick on it. They were like Nights into Dreams uses it, but it didn't use it like Mario.
Right.
So Mario has the stick. Now, when you want to turn around, the Resident Evil problem's solved because it just flick it around.
Yeah,
he just flips around real quick because you have a stick, right?
Exactly.
And as far as making like right and left turns, like how Laura, it was really hard for her to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now Mario can go diagonal real easy because you have 360 degrees of motion.
Full range of motion. So
Right.
this is something that became very commonplace, obviously, analog sticks. PlayStation implemented them.
It was so...
The DualShock.
It was so revolutionary. It was like kind of like an aha moment, really, because even though Sega had one, they didn't have a good example of using it.
They really
on the
didn't.
Saturn.
They really didn't.
Nintendo launched the system with a game that this is how you use an analog stick. And Sony, I want to say within what? It was like 98, I think the DualShock came out.
Yeah, but remember there was that precursor to the DualShock, like in 97?
But it just didn't have the rumble, but it had the sticks.
It had the sticks.
Right.
I forget what it was called. And the controller was either longer or shorter.
Yeah.
Remember?
Oh, hello. Well, because the predecessor to the DualShock was the Dual Analog, and that it had the longer grips.
But again, that's why Mario's so innovative, because it even had the concept of moving the camera around, even if it was like limited.
Yes, and even if you didn't need to as often, maybe as you would in other games.
Right.
In terms of the music, of course, speaking of big guns, our good friend Koji Kondo was going to handle all of this.
And now this music in this game is way different than...
It is.
It's way different.
There is there's a callback to the original Mario theme.
There's like a remix or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's a remix
of the Super Mario theme when you boot it up.
Yes.
Which, by the way, we should talk 2 seconds about the boot up.
Go ahead.
So you boot it up and me, Mario, and it says Mario 64, right? But then you hit start.
Yes.
And this is kind of like a tech demo thing. It has no thing. It's just a goofy thing. It almost seems like it was just them playing around with how do we make a 3D model?
Yes.
It's Mario's face, and you can pull at his cheeks and his mouth and stuff, and put him in if you hold the R button, it will freeze, and you can put him in silly positions and stuff like that.
It's like the Mario Paint thing.
But it was
where you can fuck around in the screen.
This is such a good impression for the first time you're turning on your brand new 3D N64 system.
Yep.
You're like, whoa, a fully 3D Mario's face. And it's not shitty looking either.
No, it looks good.
By those standards. Yeah. It's really not.
No, I think it looks good.
I thought it was wow, this is actually detailed.
Yeah.
For the time.
Yeah.
And it was just a goofy thing to do. I was what a good impression. Just
Very
to
good impression.
start off, right?
Yeah. But the music is different. I mean, it's not it's still very Koji Kondo.
But it has some iconic themes, like the underwater music.
I like it.
Yeah, like the Dire Docks, I think it's called, and the Babam.
The Babam one is good. I listened to the whole soundtrack the other day.
Yeah.
They
You know?
also have a remix of the Super Mario 1 Underground theme, but it's very weird.
Yeah, it's
it's really bizarre.
But it does have it. Remember, it like speeds up. It's like
It does. Yeah.
Like it just keeps getting like a little bit faster,
It
and
does.
it's almost like a clock or something. It's like very, very tick tock, tick tock.
I like it a lot. Quinn mentioned how Mario greets us with, "It's a me, Mario."
It's me, Mario.
This is Charles Martinet. Not his debut. I forget he had done one or two things before. This is where most people first heard him.
But again, this
doing
is
Mario's
this
voice.
is just another leap that like gets forgotten about in this game. Mario has a voice now.
Yeah, and
He never had a voice.
and he just had it until recently.
Yeah,
Charles Martinet just retired, didn't he?
yeah, basically.
Now, when we say he didn't have a voice, we're talking about in the video game, obviously in the cartoon, but that's not.
And the movie.
Don't bring up Bob Hoskins. No, but we're talking about in the video game. I guess except like in what Hotel Mario or what?
We don't
something for CDI.
It's not official. Like don't
something for Philips.
Yeah, it doesn't. Don't bring that. Remember, we already talked about this. That Nintendo had nothing to do with that shit.
Where is the pasta or whatever?
It's horrible.
Spaghetti. Luigi.
This is Nintendo being like, this is what his voice is.
Yeah, like,
and if you ever noticed in any other Mario media,
ever,
he always talks like Charles Martinet, even though they replaced him in whatever the last thing was.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
The guy is just doing a Charles Martinet impression.
That's his voice.
Like that's like it, Charles Martinet like set the like this is what he sounds like.
I'm gonna just say one thing. We don't have to harp on it, but this is just me growing up with different voices of Mario on the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
I hate this voice for Mario. It's too high pitched and it's too like it's just so dumb.
Charles Martinet?
Yes, I
Really?
don't like it. I don't care if anyone is mad at me for it. I think it is just like, hi, I'm Mario. It's just so stupid.
So I think
maybe I'm just spoiled because of Lou Albano
this
and
is
then the other guy.
the one thing you got to put in perspective here is that in
Do I?
Mario games, he doesn't really speak in complete sentences much. He says occasionally says it's a me Mario or whatever.
Yeah, let's go or whatever.
Right?
Here we
But,
go.
Like I think why Charles Martinet's voice is good for this is because
Nothing against
most
him.
of the time Mario's making a wee yippee like
That's
a
fine.
like. And so, though, I think that's really why they picked him, not to have like long conversations and to like dwell on the storyline with the princess in his stupid voice.
Well, that's a good point
Yeah,
because it's much better than if Lou Albano was grunting into the microphone.
It might have been like it literally might have been one of those situations where this is his voice because it stands out when he's making like grunting and
I get
jumping noises.
I totally
You know?
get it.
Like like when he like punches or whatever.
It's a good one, Quinn. So finally, production on this was complete in May of 1996.
He's like Mickey Mouse now.
We're really at this point.
Yeah.
In 96, that's what he is.
Yeah.
The game was released, as we mentioned, bundled with Nintendo 64.
What a bundle game, by the way.
It's a bundle of fun.
This actually, to me, really steps it up in the bundle department because
It's a good bundle?
Only because it's like, yeah, Mario games, blah, 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 but they were almost like, if you kind of think about it, as great as the Mario games were, they were like the most basic kind of Nintendo games there was. They weren't super complicated or anything.
No, but they were always good.
This
Glenn.
is like kind of a huge, like a big epic style game as a bundled game, you know?
I think it's a good way to set the template for the capabilities and what to expect from the Nintendo 64.
It felt so big for like, wow,
Yeah.
this seems like a really good deal. Like, like you get like this big game.
It's very vast, this
Yeah.
game. Again, we're speaking with 1996 eyes, obviously, but even now, it still holds up. The plot, which I don't want to harp on too much, because fuck the plot at this point. Like, where's the plot anymore? But basically, Mario gets a letter from Princess, and it's like, Mario, please come to the castle. I've baked a cake for you.
Yes, I don't know why that's the big goal. It's such a minor.
It's like a Seinfeld
like
episode.
even when you beat the game, you get the cake. Neat. Like it's like I always was like very underwhelmed. I just did all of this shit and like beat Bowser, and I just get to eat a cake.
That's like fucked up, man.
Yeah. It's also introducing Peach.
Yeah, so she says, Princess Toadstool, Peach.
Dear Mario, please come to the castle. I have baked a cake for you. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool. Peach.
This is the full conversion where they're like, they say like, for the people at home that are like confused that she's called Peach, I bet you in the Japanese one it just says Peach. Like it does not say Princess Toadstool.
Because Toadstool's American.
This is like the establishing of her nickname is Peach, and that's what we call her now. Like, you know.
Or is her first name Peach? Is she Peach Toadstool?
Maybe.
Does it matter?
The point is that people in America are like, who the fuck is Peach?
I was when I played it the first time,
Who the hell is Peach?
Because I knew her from Super Mario 2.
But this
Princess
was like
Toadstool.
the renaming of her like game. This is like they were like, no, it's Peach.
After every game now, she was always Peach.
Yeah.
In the U.S. So Mario's like, oh wow, I got an invitation from Peach. That's great. I want this fucking cake. And he goes into a castle. Right, he goes into her castle.
None of this is in the game, by the way. It just drops you into the world.
No, this is the plot. No,
Yeah.
I understand that. This is the plot. And then in the plot, he goes to the castle. He hears Bowser saying, "No one's home. Scram! Ha 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 ha!" And anyway, the fucking point is you have to do what you always do, but this time it's a little bit different because
we're not. Here's not 75 levels or some shit
Right.
and just get through all of them.
this is the difference. So we're in the Mushroom Kingdom, in the Mushroom Castle is where we start. That's kind of like, what do they call it? Is it a hub world or something like that? Like,
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So it's and these are all concepts that there've been hub worlds and stuff like in even 2D games, but this is a real 3D hub world, and it stands out to me because the game starts. Obviously, all that stuff Joe said is just like in the instruction manual.
Yeah, that's
or
what
some
I
shit.
always
Like,
read it from.
You
It's
hit,
always from that.
You hit start
And
in
you're
a
in the
game,
thing.
the letter pops up, and it's fully voiced, by the way.
It is. No, Princess's voice. Yeah.
And then you come out of a pipe. You're in this outside, and the castle's in front of you. That alone is not even the hub world, the outside.
Right.
The outside is literally just there so you can like learn the controls and like fuck around.
Yeah, without any danger or anything like that.
And this to me, I like still remember the Christmas morning when I hit the start button, I popped out of the pipe, and I'm just left there.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, like I can just, so what do you mean I can go anywhere?
Yeah.
Like it was mind-blowing because there was just nothing like this.
I'm sure a lot of kids felt that way.
This is one of those rare times that I distinctly remember as a kid being like, wow, the graphics can't get any better than this. Like I really thought we were like at the peak of civilization here. Like I was like, how the heck? Because it had a blue sky and it wasn't just normal terrain. It was like it had elevation and stuff. It's like it looked like a real place. It had water. It had a bridge. It had a castle. You could go wherever you wanted. There was like little secrets even around the like, not even the hub world, the just fuck around world.
The fuck around world,
Yeah.
yes.
Fuck Around World is also the alternate name for this show, apparently.
And just that alone was a huge thing. And we didn't even go in the castle yet.
Well, that's the thing. For anyone that grew up in the 16-bit or 8 and 16-bit eras like we did, to play a Mario game now where it seems like you can virtually go anywhere was a huge deal. But as far as the levels are concerned, they're basically made by Bowser because he stole these power stars, you see. It's a realistic plot.
The power stars.
Yes. And there's these paintings in the castle. And in order to enter the levels, quote unquote, you jump through the paintings.
Right.
So this is definitively, though, Quinn, not your linear side-scrolling platformer that we were used to.
Yeah. So we have a little problem here when we make this game. Now, the old way we would solve the problem of content in a Mario game is we just make hundreds of levels.
Yes,
and then
correct.
the biggest upgrade there was is we put a map so you could select the levels.
Right,
That's basically what they did, right? Instead of just making you go straight line through them. In this game, they're like, we're going for this like sandbox element, right?
Yep.
Where it's like, these are like very large levels. We can't make 50 to 70 of these. Like that would be like the game would never get finished. And how would we even fit it
How
on
would
a
we fit
cartridge?
it on- yeah, on a cart.
We need 2 cartridges. What are we doing here,
What
right?
is this, WrestleMania 4?
Yeah. So what they very wisely chose to do is there's actually an impressive amount of levels for what this is. I forget how many there is, like 12 or 15 or something.
Why don't we run down the names real
Yeah.
quick? So we got Bob-omb Battlefield, Womp's Fortress, remember Womp, Jolly Roger Bay, Cool Cool Mountain, Bowser in the Dark World, The Princess's Secret Slide, The Secret Aquarium, Tower of the Wingcap, Snowman's Land, Wet Dry World, Tall Tall Mountain,
Yeah.
Tiny Huge Island, Tiny Talk Clock, Tick-Tock Clock, excuse
Tick-Tock
me.
Clock. Yeah,
yes.
so a very notable one.
Rainbow Ride and Bowser in the Sky, Wing Mario Over the Rainbow, and there is also, of course, the castle itself.
So how many does that add up to? 20?
It's I think it's like 16.
So it's falling short of the level amount that we're used to in the other ones.
Yeah,
right?
but they're much bigger.
So Joe said the word course, and that's
Course,
really what they
yes.
are.
They are.
So essentially the idea is, okay, we can't have 100 levels or whatever, but what we do is you enter a course, and there's more than one thing to do. It's not get to the end.
Correct.
It's find the star in some manner. So there's some stuff that is universal for every level, like get 100 coins and you get a star. Get the 8 red coins and you get a star. Every level, I think, opens up with a simple, like, there's a star in a location that's readily visible and just go get it.
Yes.
Right? Those are, like, I feel like the 3, like, ubiquitous missions. The rest of the missions, there's usually, like, 7 to 8 total in each level.
Yes.
The additional missions are usually always like find something at the bottom of the water or fight a boss or whatever.
Yep.
So each course is kind of like 8-ish levels in one.
Yeah, like Quinn said, the biggest difference here is it's not just get to the end.
Right.
We were so accustomed to just running to the right and reaching a goal or
you
jumping
have
over
to
the
explore
thing.
now.
You have to actually do shit.
Yeah.
You have to work harder.
You have to look.
You have to look.
Yeah.
Got to use your eyes.
Now, to be fair, like I said, a lot of them are like those universal goals, like get 100 coins, get 8 stars, or get 8 red coins.
Yeah.
That's like in every level. But there's other stuff that's like pick up the baby penguin and he's like, hey, I don't know where my mom is. And then you bring him on the slide and you got to get him to his mom, right? And then the mom's like, thank you, and gives you the star.
And then Mario said, holy
Spoilers.
shit, a talking penguin.
Yeah.
Real fucking funny. Henny Youngman joke book over here. Fuck.
Hey, mate. Who's Henny Youngman?
Hey, I told you to get out of here.
Mario's got some new moves here because obviously we got a bigger control. You have to be able to do more things. It's 3D, so
this moveset is funny because one of the mistakes they made with this game, it's almost like they went in, they're like, Mario's got to be able to do fucking everything.
Yeah, it's a little excessive.
It's so excessive to the point is over the years people realize that he could do a little too much for the levels that he's in, and you can like break the game.
Yes.
He's way too accessible. He has stuff that's just crazy.
Yeah, and without maybe covering all of it, you can obviously still jump and swim and all that stuff, but you can sidestep, double jump, triple jump.
Yeah.
You could do somersaults, wall kicks, long jumps. You could grab, you could jump kick, you could throw, you can dive. All sorts of kicks. A lot of kicks, Quinn,
yes.
in this game.
The two things that are busted as hell is the kicks and that like belly flop dive thing, right?
Yes.
It's like I've seen people do shit with the belly flop dive that I was like, what the like people getting to places they really shouldn't be, but also using the kick to like kind of like elevate them
themselves
into the air more than they should be, and then you just start seeing like them clipping through the walls and stuff because they've just figured out that like, oh, if you jump here and flop there and jump kick here, suddenly it's like you can just like clip the level and go to wherever the objective is.
So
like,
weird, right?
Yeah, it's like fucked up. Like it's totally like busted in the best way because that makes the speed running of the game so fun to watch.
That whole speedrun community probably appreciates that.
Yeah.
Let us know if you're one of them. There's also a health point system, I guess we can call it here, where you have a pie with 8 pieces.
Right.
Peanut butter pie?
And you can replenish your life
with coins.
Yeah, with coins, exactly.
Any coins, red or regular.
Red or regular kind. Similar, not exactly the same, but it's similar to Super Mario 2. There's a bit of a health meter. It's
now,
smaller.
I felt this was a bit of a necessity, and I have a reasoning behind that. They couldn't make it get a mushroom and get hit and all this shit because
there's not even the mushroom for the record.
Yeah, it's not necessary. The reason to me is because in the 3 dimensions, you are so much more susceptible to getting hit than in the 2 dimensions.
You're right about that.
It was like
you're right.
They had to. Like if you just died when you got hit, it would be so hard,
frustrating,
and boring, and like just be like, oh man, this sucks.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Because again, we're in a 3D environment now. The object, I mean, obviously still you don't want to get hit.
You don't want to get hit, but
the object is not just like jump over a bunch of enemies anymore.
They need to give you a little bit of a
grace period.
Just like a little bit of safety here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the game is about getting around and maneuvering. It's not really about like avoiding enemies and fighting enemies, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like there's not even, for those of you that don't, you don't even have firepower. I mean, there's other power-ups.
There is. They're very cool, but
the traditional ones, they're not in the game.
Good. Like it would have been a nightmare.
No, I know, because you have like different types of caps now that you wear.
And imagine having to like figure out like what is the physics of the fireball? Like, that would have been a nightmare. I'm glad they didn't put that shit in there.
Imagine, like, you have to control with the C-pad. If you have that, it doesn't
because you're trying to aim it straight and stuff? Yeah, it would have been like, no.
It would have been insane.
No. Fireball really couldn't work in this environment.
Not this early
Maybe
on.
later on if they did it, but
Correct.
yeah.
So you get, like, the wing cap, which you can imagine what that is. You fly briefly.
That's funny that we just said, like, oh, the fireball physics. It's the physics were always the problem back then because you literally had to have the processing power to do the calculation, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's amazing that they even fit the fucking
the wing cap.
The wing cap, and that's the most impressive one because
is.
there's actual, like, flying physics to it.
It's
right?
really cool.
It's very impressive.
It's
for the time.
very standout. There's also, what is it, metal cap, where you're just like immune to certain stuff.
Metal cap has two uses. Yeah, you're immune for a little bit, right?
Yep.
But the other thing is, again, it has physics. So for a lot of times there will be water next to the metal cap, and the idea is there's some places you can't get to even swimming because you're kind of floating, right? So what the metal cap lets you do is it lets you like walk like normally in the water.
Right. Yep.
And so there's little nooks and crannies down there that there's actual like objectives that are like, get this star that's over here under the water that you can't get to without the metal.
And there's also conversely the vanish cap.
Yes, and that's again another thing like I just said. So sometimes there'll be, for example, a star behind a cage and you can't get through it any way but to use the vanish cap.
Exactly. Because it basically makes you just like phase through it.
You can walk through walls.
Yeah,
like that's the huge like advantage to it.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of cool new stuff here that we hadn't seen before. In terms of the characters, again, I'll run some of them down, but it's like, let's not get carried away because this is not that type of game.
There's some that are memorable, like that are like not as memorable in other Mario games, right? So like mainly the Lakitu is not a big asshole now.
I was going to say, Quinn, are you happy now finally with Lakitu?
This is his best incarnation. He's the cameraman. Yeah. He's the frickin', he's actually like not, in fact, he's like vital.
Yeah. How do you like how they like use that? Because he's in the cloud, so of course he's in the sky.
It's funny to me that they felt the need to explain why you could move the camera.
I love it, though. I know, I love it.
Like, it's so stupid. Like,
they did it.
No other game explains why the camera's moving.
No,
I've never played any other 3D video game that explained like, oh, somebody's holding that camera.
I love it.
Like,
I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's just so stupid.
Yeah.
But so Nintendo.
It's very Nintendo.
Fucking Toad is in the game, but like he's just there, like he talks briefly.
So he's
or
like
whatever.
Mr. Tutorial in this game. He's like, hey Mario, you gotta get 5 stars to get to that door. It says 5 on the door. It's like, shut up, Toad. Like, it's like you're fucking using.
What's what's wrong with giving 5 stars?
But sometimes he gives you something useful, like if it was really your first time playing, you might not know there's a double jump, and he would like say stuff like that.
Right,
like,
that's true. There's also the nice Bob-ombs, the Bob-omb buddies.
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of like wander around. They don't like the regular Bob-ombs. That's
they
like
like
the whole
talk
problem.
to you. They're like, hey, the bad Bob-ombs, they took over.
Yeah,
like this is bullshit, man. Like you need to help us.
Fuck the bad Bob-ombs.
Yeah.
There's Koopa of the Koopa Troopers, Koopa the Quick.
So he's kind of like a rival. Like, you remember you race him?
He wants to race you, yeah. There's Hoot, the talking owl.
You need him to get to places sometimes.
Yep. Penguins, like we talked about.
Yep.
Snowmen. That's in the Snowman Lost His Head mission. Mips.
I hate that fucking thing. The rabbit.
Princess's rabbit.
It's like, hey, catch me. And he's like jumping. You can only catch him if you do the dive into him. Like, it's
real.
like, fuck this guy.
There's Dory the dinosaur.
What a weird dinosaur guy.
I know.
He's just like, I'm here to take you somewhere, and that's it. That's all he does in the whole game.
Why couldn't we just have Yoshi be the only dinosaur?
Yeah.
Yoshi is in the game, by the way.
But he's like a secret.
He's
only on like the top of the castle or something.
Very minor.
Like the monkey also.
Oh, yeah.
Horrible.
God. Yeah, horrible.
Horrible.
Because
he's just like the rabbit. He's just like an irritating thing.
Yeah, but he steals your hat, too.
Yeah.
He does.
Mm-hmm.
So there's new...
That does something, by the way, your hat. Like, if you lose it, I think your shields are like less or something.
Like, it's not good.
Yeah.
But also, it's like the first time where you get to just see Mario's hair without the hat. Like in the video game, it's weird.
It's kind of like, I feel like they did it as a funny. Like, it's almost like it's played for laughs. It's like, he lost his hat.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah.
Totally is. There are new enemies. I'm just going to run down some of the names here.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't think, Quinn, that any of these are as iconic or memorable as like the Super Mario 3 enemies.
No, I feel like that's like a weakness of this game, right?
Yep.
Is that the game is so centered around platforming. It's like such a raw platforming game that the enemies are just kind of like obstructions and they don't matter.
They're very generic, a lot of them.
Right? The bosses are cool, though.
Yes.
That's about it. But the standard enemies are just kind of like in the way. Like Amp, for example. Like he's just like there.
He's a
like
ball of metal.
I wouldn't even think of him as an enemy. I would just think of him as an inanimate object.
What about like Bubba the fish? Like who cares?
Yeah, it's just nothing.
It's very stock in a lot of ways. Like Chuckya, which is a purple Bob-omb.
It's one of those things they would improve in the later 3D Mario games.
Yes.
Like it's one of those things that was like, okay, we got to make some sacrifices here, obviously.
Yep.
They didn't like slack off. There's like plenty of them, but they
right.
serve their purpose.
But some of the returning ones I just want to shout out. Like, obviously, we talked about Koopas and Bob-ombs. Boo is back, the ghost.
Boo's a big one. And you know what? The one thing that was cool about this enemy, it's one of the only enemies that's creative with how you have to kill it. You run around him really fast and he gets dizzy and then he like dies because he gives up.
It
and
is
he just
pretty good.
Goes away. Like
it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Our good friend Bullet Bill, obviously. Welcome back to the show, Bullet Bill and Chain Chomp. One of the Shy Guys, this is the Fly guy because he can fly. I like that we are now fully mixing Super Mario 2 enemies with
Well, you always like when
Goombas.
Shy Guy.
They're good!
Shy Guy's allowed to exist with the Goombas.
Great. Goombas are there. Goombet, which
Yeah.
is a tiny one. Used to be like Micro Goomba. Monty Mole, who does not deserve to be in this game, but here he is.
He's back, baby.
Piranha Plants, of course, can't have a Mario game without them. Pokey, I'm very proud of Pokey for making this game.
I'm proud of Pokey being one of the only 2D enemies in the entire game, but he's like one of the blatantly like not 3D enemies.
He's just normal Pokey almost, right?
Like he just changes. Like you can literally see the 2D sprite changing angle when you like go around him. Like you're like, what the hell?
It's true. And I'm very happy to report, in case you were worried, folks, Thwomp.
Yes, Thwomp.
Thwomp.
Big return for Thwomp.
Dusty.
He's all over this thing.
Thwomp is all over this, baby.
Ooh, that right there, baby. It's the worst Duthy Roth imprint I ever heard.
Now, bosses. Okay.
Now, these are actually memorable.
Big Bob-omb.
Big Bob-omb, that like notable first enemy. Like a lot of people who played this game, some people, obviously not everyone beat the game, but everyone ran into Big Bob-omb.
Yeah, he's wearing the crown.
He's one of the enemies that introduces to you, like, essentially, how do you fight the bosses in a 3D game? And essentially, you pick them up.
Yes.
And you throw them. And that's what Big Bob-omb is introducing. He's so easy, but...
Yeah, but that's the idea.
Yeah, you have to run around him real fast, get on his butt, and throw him. So you can lift him, Because you can't lift him from the front, because he'll bite you or whatever he does.
Run around, get on his butt, and throw him. I believe that's a sport in Iceland.
Yep.
Anyway, Womp King. Now, Womps are new. They're kind of like Thwomps, but they're not Thwomps.
Kind of. Like, they're big walls that try to fall on you. But the cool thing about this, again, they teach
also
you...
a sport in Iceland.
They teach you another function, right? So
yes, Quinn.
Womp King, the concept is that...
Making us say Womp King.
He falls on his face to try to crush you.
Yes.
But if he falls and his backside's exposed, and there's a little piece of tape like he got
butt stuff,
like he got hurt there before,
like
and then you
Hippo.
have to do a butt sit on him or whatever.
So much butt in this game,
Quinn. And then it hurts him, and he's like, "Ow, my back."
Miyamoto got back, perhaps.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bowser, because of course Bowser's in the game.
Bowser. To me, when I was a kid, I thought this was like the coolest freaking version of him. He's massive.
Yes, finally.
And he has the unique, like, you pick his tail up, and then you have to like build up momentum,
like hammer toss him.
Like, and then there's like little spikes on the end of the stage, and then you have to like, if you miss and he goes off the stage, he'll just come back and try to like jump on you. So like you have to like, okay, I got to get the angle right. Like, I got to let go at the right time so that he flies in the right direction. It's like, I love this boss.
I think it's a great boss.
And you have to fight him 3 times. He's like the main enemy.
Yeah, he's got 3 different levels. He's in Bowser in the Dark World, Bowser in the Fire Sea, and Bowser in the Sky. There's Big Boo, which is obviously a giant boo.
Giant boo.
What about Mr. Big Eye, Quinn? Your thoughts?
Mr. Big Eye.
This is Big Boo related.
This is again another make him dizzy kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think he does a little bit more. I think he can like shoot shit at you or something.
In case you can't tell, folks, he's a big
eye.
Big Bully is a large.
So he's literally a bully. So what he does, he kind of looks like Big Bob-omb, but essentially to fight him, what he tries to do is you're on like a square with lava surrounding you.
Yeah.
And he's trying to like literally like push you off. And the idea is to get him to run at you, and you jump out of the way right in time, and then he falls off into the lava and hurts himself.
And I think it's a funny name, Big Bully. It's just like very
It's exactly
generic.
what he is.
It is. Big Bully Busick. IROC, which
I barely remember what this thing does.
It's stone, and it has like hands and eyes
It's in
and
the
shit.
pyramid stages or whatever. Those
Shifting Sandland, yeah. Chili Bully, which is an ice bully.
Very unmemorable.
Piranha Flowers.
These
these
one's
are
memorable.
Gigantic piranhas.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool because they're on a tiny, huge island, of course.
Yes, this is. What's funny is they put a big world thing essentially in the game, which is, I always thought that was funny.
Because who didn't love that in 3?
Yeah, and what's cool is you can, just like 3, you can switch it to big and small.
Yeah, I think it's really, that's why it's tiny, huge, right? And then I'm sad to report this because I always liked him, but we don't need to see him another enemy here. Wiggler, the caterpillar.
Always back.
Always back.
Never goes away.
Remember, starts happy, then gets mad, blah, blah, blah.
Hey, a lot like your audience today.
I mean, again, gameplay-wise, I think there's a lot that could be said. I think really leaning into the reception, the legacy here, you know, there are a lot, Quinn, a lot of kids that probably got Nintendo 64 Christmas of 96.
I think there's a lot of kids that this might have been their first Mario game. I'm not even kidding.
That are definitely that are younger than us. Yeah. A lot that probably have these fond memories of opening their 64. Can't wait to play their Mario 64.
That was me. I couldn't wait.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I'm not one of them, and that's nothing against the game. I just did not ever have a Nintendo 64. So, I didn't need to disclose this, but I'm doing it for the sake of honesty. But I do want to be clear that...
You did play it.
Yes. Yes, I have.
Like, it was like pop culture. Like, this game was just around.
I've played it many a time.
Yeah.
My brother had it, so there you go. But I also played it later in my teenage years and probably in my 20s via emulation.
Right.
Once I had a computer that could handle, what is it, Project 64, I think, is the name of the emulator?
Yep.
I played it plenty of times, so I am familiar with it. But I do want to be upfront that I don't have the nostalgic experience, but I bet a lot of our fans do. So I do want to hear your guys' story.
And
Quinn, you loved it, right?
It was like game changing to me because when I was a kid, I had a Super Nintendo and I was like, oh, I'm not going to get PlayStation Sour. I'm going to get Nintendo 64. So like this was my first game that I played of that new generation.
Yeah,
like I played a PlayStation at other people's houses. They had one, but like
this was yours.
This was mine, and after I played it, and I even beat it, which was rare back then. That's probably one of the other things too is that N64 was when I was finally old enough to like get games and beat them.
Sure,
and like play them all the way through.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember just Christmas playing the crap out of this game and just like doing all the objectives, getting the 70 stars so I could fight Bowser, the third version of him at the end.
Yep.
And just it felt like this was a big epic adventure. And that was like a new thing for Mario. Mario never felt like a big epic adventure. It felt like just like a very playful like kind of thing. Like suddenly it's like, whoa, like this is everything's a big deal, right? It's almost like Zelda.
You got this the year it came out in 96?
I believe so.
So you were 10, yeah.
Yeah, Christmas of 96.
So we're in a unique age, the two of us and some of our listeners, where we spanned multiple generations of consoles and being cognizant, and when they were still in their height. Like, I remember when Nintendo was still the console before Super Nintendo came out, and Mario 3 had just come out.
Right.
And I remember the launch of 16-bit. Me, personally, the next console I got after Super Nintendo was PlayStation.
And that's
I never went this direction.
I feel like we've discussed this before just on the down low about like PlayStation is the like wild card factor of this time period. It's
the great usurper.
Very great usurper because so what's so interesting, and it kind of coincides with Mario 64 to me, right? Is all while this was coming out, one thing that was kind of I was cognizant of is there was almost like this pressure of like Mario 64's got to prove why we were going to wait for N64 and not pick up a PlayStation.
Because it's almost a year's difference.
Right? Because PlayStation had put out Twisted Metal and like all these like cool little games.
PlayStation was cranking by 96.
Now, PlayStation didn't have its big epic game yet, which would end up being Final Fantasy VII.
It was soon.
It was soon, and it was just Mario kind of had this. Mario 64 kind of had a pressure on it because PlayStation had Tomb Raider, Twisted Metal, all these like
Crash Bandicoot was
Crash
coming out,
a bunch of sports games.
Yep,
and it came out of nowhere. at least in the U.S. Like,
yes.
In the U.S., and this is during the time, I remember I lived in a condo complex.
Yeah.
And one of the kids next door to me, he had a PlayStation, and he said, come over, I have a PlayStation. I'm like, what's PlayStation?
Right.
Like the fact that was like a thing. People didn't know what it was.
Kids didn't, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, he's showing it to me, and I'm like, wait, it's on a disc, and like, whoa, these games are in 3D, and like, I'm sitting here, I feel like, I remember at the time feeling like kind of a schmuck, because I'm like, I'm sitting around waiting for Nintendo to make one of these, because I wanted the 3D, I knew about 3D.
Yeah, of course.
Especially because I played Star Fox, and I'm like, oh, the next generation, it's going to be 3D, right?
Now, did you learn the word schmuck at camp?
Probably.
Just double checking.
But the point is that like it was the backdrop to Mario 64. And I remember coming out of Mario 64 being like, yeah, Nintendo showed them. Because it was so impressive, even compared to Play. It really was.
It really was impressive.
Right? Like, even though like on PlayStation, there are kind of showpieces where like Ridge Racer and stuff like where the graphics were crazy or whatever.
For the time.
And Wipeout and whatnot. It was still like Mario 64 was like kind of a cut above. I think the legacy of that game, though, is that what it showed was, and this was the unfortunate aspect of Nintendo 64, was that only Nintendo could make the good games in 3D on N64.
On 64, yeah.
Right? Like, because then the problem with N64, and I think a lot of N64 users will remember this, outside a game made by Nintendo, be it GoldenEye, Mario Kart, Legend of Zelda.
Yeah. Ocarina
all
of
the
Time.
Games were kind of...
Yeah, the third-party ones
There was other good games like, from third parties, but most of them were not of the quality.
No, and most of the lauding and the acclaim went to the other system, like PlayStation. Like, if it was on both,
right?
Normally, the critics' favorite was the PlayStation
because
one.
it had the music
and
it had more. Sometimes it had more content because of the disc.
Yes,
right?
correct.
So PlayStation really, this was the first time almost Mario was up against something like PlayStation, which was a whole different like paradigm.
Different challenge than Sonic, which was basically just supposed to be like the cooler version of Mario.
And at the time you're thinking, Mario 64, that's got to be the greatest game ever made, right? Well, it's one thing if you have one greatest game ever made, but all the rest of the games stink.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the backdrop of all of this.
I think it's important that you set that context, not only for the sake of this episode with the Mario 64, but if we inevitably do a Sony PlayStation episode, I think that's good stuff for the video game fans that are going to listen to that one to keep in mind.
Yeah.
That this was not... You know, in 1991 with Mario World, we were able to say, like, without a shadow of a doubt, you know, this fucking proved that Nintendo could beat Sega and would eventually.
Yeah, this mainly proved that Nintendo still had it.
Yes.
But they were the only one that's still on their hardware. Yeah. They were the only one that had it.
They knew how to make a Mario game still. But as far as the actual reception of the game, critically and, you know, publicly, it was very well received, pretty much universally acclaimed.
It was considered groundbreaking,
and
too.
It was.
That's the one other thing here is, and I think that's why I'm bringing up PlayStation and Sega and all this, because
that's the climate in which this existed.
This was a time period where we were moving into a completely new kind of game. All games since the 1980s, since the 70s even, were in the two dimensions.
Yeah.
Be it other than like weird experimentations. They're all outliers. This was saying, like, no, the mainstream video games are going to be in 3D. Like the normal games that like people have in their homes.
That
right?
was right. That was now going to become the standard.
The thing that was a breakthrough is that for all the cool stuff that PlayStation, even Sega Saturn were doing, they were clunky. They were primitive.
Yeah.
They weren't all the way there. And I think what Mario 64 did was it was like a blueprint of like, this is how you make a character action video game in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, I think that's true, Quinn. I totally agree. This set a template for 3D platformers going forward. Not even just platformers.
Action, because Mario could punch and stuff. That was like a prime example of like, oh, okay, so like to this day, you know how like the square button on a PlayStation controller is always like your attack button?
Yeah.
It's in like the same exact position where Mario's punch button is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true.
It is. It set a template there, the non-linear open exploration aspect, the hub world that was also influential. Dan Houser, who worked on GTA, said,
anyone who makes 3D games who says they've not borrowed something from Mario is lying.
Yeah, exactly. It was so needed at that time.
Do you think, Quinn, that its legacy supersedes perhaps how good of a game it is, though?
I do. Because what it was doing was so cutting edge that it was bound to have flaws.
Yes.
Like, because they were in no man's land. They were just like
uncharted waters.
We were like, for example, I don't think they knew that moving the camera around they weren't probably in their heads like, this is the way. They probably were they're probably just like, they were probably playing around with it, and they're like, oh, this is annoying when you can't like see where Mario is. Let's see if we like play around with a solution to fix that.
Right.
Like, they weren't probably thinking like, this is how it's going to be.
No,
like,
no, I think
they
you're
weren't
right.
thinking like 30 years from now, this is how games are still like, no, they were probably just like solving their own problems, and like they probably weren't thinking like, we're trying to make some real like statement
set a
piece.
standard here, right?
Yeah,
Red book, so to
it's
speak.
like they were just trying to figure it out, just like everyone else, just like the people at Eidos with Tomb Raider and and that kind of thing, and
they're just trying to figure out like, how do we see Mario again? We can't see him right now. That's all it is.
They were just trying to figure it out, and like everyone was.
Yes.
But I think what stood out here, and I think this is like another aspect to this. This showed why Nintendo was always correct in keeping their experienced developers and teams in-house.
Yeah.
Because even though those people were good at making 2D games, they were just good at making games.
Yeah.
And so you were just giving them a new tool set.
That's all it is.
And the talent to make games shone through even with the new tools.
Yeah, they weren't good because they were on 16 or 8-bit infrastructure.
They proved that, like, no, they're just good makers of games. Right.
That's a great point. That sums up Nintendo during this period of time, honestly. Overall, I'd say this was a trendsetter. I think we agree on that. It was hugely successful. It was hugely fun. And it did prove that Nintendo was at least able to be a player in this new generation.
Right.
Like Quinn very astutely said, it wound up proving that Nintendo was able to make good Nintendo games, but maybe not everyone else that was developing for the 64.
Not everyone else maybe could keep up with them on their console.
Yeah.
Like, that was the other consequences. They, like, for example, they designed their controller around their games.
Yes.
But, like, what if you're another game and you're like, this doesn't work for us?
No,
right?
I know, you're right.
Because the C buttons are so funny to me because the shape of them is so tiny.
Yes.
So, like, for example, if like Street Fighter, they want to put a Street Fighter with 6 buttons, it's
What
6
a
buttons.
pain in the ass.
But the buttons are so crusty because they were designed for cameras and not for like hitting it like a Sega Saturn or they're the 3 button, but they're all big buttons.
Correct, yeah.
Like, again, it's like Nintendo's just like, this is for us if you want to use it.
We don't care, really. We're doing Mario.
Yeah,
That's what we do. But overall, I think a lot of people love this game. People that are our age, or I'm not saying nobody older than us loves it, but I think people our age is like the cutoff, and it's mainly people younger than us that really have that fondness for this game. Would you say? I mean,
I agree.
We're getting into the generation now where it's like, I was starting to get more interested in other things, not that I didn't play video games. So, folks, we want to hear from you on that. Did you love this game? Maybe did you play it retroactively? Maybe an emulation or just the console version? Like me, I played them both. Quinn obviously grew up with it.
Right.
You love this. A couple of my friends had it. We want to hear from our friends, though, that are listening to this. But we both agree, Quinn, this game mattered, if nothing else.
It is considered amongst video game circles as one of the most important video games ever made.
Yeah.
Period. That's really its legacy. It's as important as Super Mario Brothers 1.
Right. Nobody calls it the best.
No.
But
that would be like Super Mario Brothers 3 or World. That's kind of the kind of weird bookend of maybe this Mario series, is that the first one was a groundbreaking and like influential and important, and the last one in this series is groundbreaking and influential and important. But neither is the best of the series.
I think that is well said, and I think you have summed it up.
Yeah.
And as we put this series on pause here, we truly hope you've appreciated it. Now, Acid Wash Memories isn't going anywhere. Don't worry. We're coming back next week for something completely different.
That isn't Mario.
Nothing Mario related. In the meantime, please be sure to follow us and let us know your thoughts on Twitter at AWM Podcast. Why don't you join our Facebook group, Acid Wash Memories, on Facebook, and we would love it if you left us a review. But I think it is officially game over for the Mario series. Until next week, I'm Joe Murata. That's Michael Quinn. We'll be back for more Acid Washed Memories.
See ya.
Like what you heard? Be sure to leave a review and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We will see you next week.